Hello, and welcome to Behavior-Based Safety. My name is Teresa Stack, and I am the instructor for this course offered through the University of Idaho. So the objectives for our first learning unit are to understand both the internal and the external factors that influence the perception of safety on both a climate and a cultural level. So we have these two different competing elements of behavior-based safety. One is the climate, which occurs daily, just like the climate in your environment changes. And then the other one is the culture, which doesn't change as readily and is more deep-seated inside of the organization itself. And different organizations have varying degrees of climate and cultural changes. So how do you define safety in your own words? And would it be something that you've been taught, or would it be something that's internal, the way that you define safety? A general perception of safety is that all is good as long as we're following the rules. And for people who are in occupational safety and health, you recognize that that's not true. Just following the rules doesn't necessarily make somebody safe or a situation safe, and that it's internal factors, internal to the human and internal to the organization. But the ANSI standard defines safety as freedom from unacceptable risk. And risk is defined as an estimate of the probability of the hazard relating to the incident and the exposure. So I really like to say that safety is being free from harm or threat. Your risk is the combination of both the consequences of the event happening and the probability that the event would occur. And harm is the potential for danger to occur, or hazard is the potential for danger to occur. So simply put, safety is more or less a condition of judgment, and that this changes over time based on the culture of the environment itself. And so we do have this French and Bell's model of where they put the organizational, 6 organizational factors together. And safety is part of that culture, so it has to do with the environment, the technology, the tasks that people are performing, the social, economic factors relating to not only the individual but the organization, as well as the type of organizational structure and the goals of the organization itself. And so perception is the process by which people organize, interpret, retrieve, and respond to the information in the world around us. So in reality, the current state of safety is related to the individuals and how they feel. But we try to take this global look at our organization and say, in the absence of our leadership, what would safety look like? However, we know that our leadership is so important in developing our safety culture, as well as developing the overall culture of the organization, where climate is influenced more by the people who are, so to speak, on the shop floor, doing the job day to day. Now, I love this picture because it tends to be what people believe safety to take a look at. Safety has to do with, evaluating risks, putting controls in place, and if they don't work, distributing some PPE and putting training out there. And why that definitely is a major part of our roles as safety and health professionals, it's that underlying current that's going to make the difference from day to day.
When we got together and first started working the program, I wanted us to have a model that we used which would give us a common language. And so the model that we used is Jim Reason's 5-factor model, and we modified it a little bit, but the elements basically stay the same. It's reporting culture about communication, learning culture, a flexible culture, a engaged culture, and by doing that, when things happen, things for leaders, for supervisors, for workers, when something happens on their day-to-day basis at a site, my hope is that we can talk about it, that we hear about it, that we can try to fix things and make things better.
that's one of the more difficult things about safety culture, is getting across to folks that reporting is just a absolute mandatory crux part of the overall program. If management doesn't know about these things, we can't go about bringing resources to bear to improve. And so it is incumbent upon everybody to support the reporting culture so that we can go ahead and bring about those improvements to protect the individuals at the facilities, as well as to improve mission success.
By practicing a reporting culture, we're gathering data. Data in all of its forms, from the most minuscule to the most substantive, is how we make decisions. And we've got to be able to make informed decisions to make the safest choices. The just element of the safety culture really means that we put each other on the same pedestal. We're looking at each other from the same perspectives, from a human perspective. We're looking at each other from a consistent set of caring, independent of whether or not we're high on the hierarchy of leadership or we're a worker bee. We want to make sure we see each other as people first.
NASA has always been based on the idea that what we do is pushing the envelope. To do that, we are intent upon ensuring that we understand the risks that are there, that we mitigate those that we can mitigate, and those that we can't, that we go ahead and minimize and fully understand them. A just and learning culture in safety supports that aspect of the NASA mission. And if we don't do that, then we risk then not being successful in the future. And that's not something that as members of NASA that I want to ever have happen. I want this agency to be successful in everything it does.
The idea of a flexible culture is that we anticipate and prepare for changes. We know that over time we're going to need to change. So when do we change? How do we change? So part of making changes means we need to have data, we need to have information, and when we get enough of it, we make changes, appropriate changes. So what's enough and when do we change? That's all about sort of the change management process, and that's part of a flexible culture. A strong safety culture is flexible enough to recognize when there's a need for change and makes those changes, and the workforce is prepared and resilient enough that when those changes happen, it all goes smoothly.
When people aren't flexible, a lot of things can go wrong. I talked about the new technology, the innovative designs and things that need to occur, but if you've got a lot of energetic folks who are working to be flexible and work with the new technology, and you've got this group of folks who are kind of stuck in their old ways, obviously you're going to have some headbutting there. So that can easily play into some project delays on the time, the cost, the schedule. All of those can have slips there. So getting together and really understanding from the beginning, making sure everybody's on the same page with the direction that's going to be approached is very important.
So learning culture is important because we have lots and lots of information, but we don't all know about it. And so making sure that people have access to information, that information is not just sitting in a particular location. So information is being fed into a system, but it's also being pushed out of a system, and that when I have a question about it, I can access it and get information. So there's all kinds of ways that can be done. It can be done in newsletters, it can be done in databases, it can be done in seminars, it can be done at all hands meetings, it can be done in just regular presentations or spontaneous off-the-cuff things. But it's important that within the culture there be formal and informal ways of information being passed around. And in a strong safety culture where there's a learning organization, that's just part of how we do business.
So learning that continuous improvement that we all need, and not necessarily the formal training, but learning about how other people approach similar situations and learning from their experience.
Safety culture is critical to our success as an entire working environment. without everybody engaged in what's going on and thinking about safety on a regular basis, we wouldn't have a safe work environment. It's absolutely a must, and it's something that as an agency we've done a much better job in the last few years. We've increased the awareness of safety overall and increased the viewpoint of everyone taking responsibility, their own personal responsibility, and getting involved. And you can see that in the Safety Culture Survey comments that come in. A lot of people made comments this last time around about their involvement, their participation, what they're doing, and what they could do in the future. So I'm seeing that a lot more just in the responses as well.
We continually try to stress that you do have that authority if you see an operation or an act that you think, I mean, it doesn't have to prove out to be, but if you think at the time that it's unsafe, you have the authority and you should go and halt that operation until further investigation.
It's important that we think systemically through the organization and again have a common language where we can talk about the human element as it's interfacing into the organization and how is that affecting safety. You know, is that degrading safety? Is it supporting safety? Is it making things too risky? And if it's too risky, what do you do about it? How do you speak up? Who do you go to? What do they do about it? Does it come back full circle? And so having a way where people know I'm going to say something about it, I'm going to be treated fairly when I do, I'm going to make sure that changes happen. Somebody in that system is going to make a change if that's needed. We're going to then talk about it so everybody learns about it. Make sure that changes happen. Somebody in that system is going to make a change if that's needed. We're going to then talk about it so everybody learns about it. And everybody is part of that whole system. Everybody's engaged in making all those right things happen. And so that's why we use that model, is to try to bring it full circle where it's continually feeding and each person is doing their part to keep us all safe and going home at the end of the day.
So some things inside of an organization that stop that organization from either moving forward or slow it down in its ability or its role, its progression in building safety into its culture, not just its climate, is just basically something we call friction. And that's when something interferes with this moving forward process. And a lot of times it has to do with production issues, production coming first, or finance, the business model of safety not being as strong as the business model of just paying for the injuries or the illnesses, and really not recognizing the value of safety. And that's why this perception of safety, or our mental model, is how we see safety, how we see that role inside of the organization, how we could identify some of the weaknesses inside of the organization if they are truly there, and make that change slowly over time to move to a more behavior-based safety type of program. And I think that we all understand that there's going to be a gap between what's actually happening in the workplace versus how we would like it to be, or how management would like it to be, and how much time and effort they're putting into building the culture from the bottom up. And we do this fairly well inside of our business models when we want to be, the world-class provider of aircraft landing gear. However, we don't have a strong reporting system in place, for example. Although a lot of people do have their strong reporting systems in place, it's neither here nor there. But one thing to start to think about is, how is safety perceived inside of your organization, or the organization you're looking at improving, and where do we want to go from there? So where are we versus where do we want to go? Because that's kind of our gap analysis. And so to have a strong, well-designed, flexible safety management system, we know that that's going to enhance our program overall. And what we may need to do is take a look at our leadership's personalities and attitudes, and the way that safety, as well as other things inside of the organization, are communicated down the food chain, right? Is it a push, or is there some give and take, and that people actually have some autonomy inside of the workplace? Technology changes, poor planning, operational changes, lacks in training. These are all ways in which our safety model isn't as strong as it could be. So at the end of the day, organizations are, of course, not static. They are constantly in flux and changing. And therefore, safety is something that isn't really stagnant, and that we have to keep working at building the mental model that safety is important inside of our organization, and proving that as safety and health professionals by being part of that end line or that business line of safety.